Hi viewers, welcome back to Sahara TV. It's been a few days now that the world lost a legend, the father of Africa, Nelson Mandela. And as the world is celebrating his life, on Sahara TV today, among many things that we're doing to honor Nelson Mandela, we like to take a look at his many faces, the real man called Nelson Mandela. And who's better to talk to us about this than someone who actually wrote a whole book about Nelson Mandela, the many faces of Nelson Mandela. I'm talking about Danny Schechter. He's a television producer, an independent filmmaker, a blogger, and media critic who writes and lectures frequently about the media here in the United States and all over the world. Danny has made 6 documentary movies about Nelson Mandela, 6 about Mandela alone. And he's also written a book called Madiba A to Z, The Many Faces of Nelson Mandela. Danny, welcome to Sahara TV.
Thank you.
It's good to have you.
Adeola, yes.
I'm so sorry because I know you knew him personally. You've met him several times. You interviewed him. So, how did you take the news when you heard about his death?
Well, like everybody else, everyone expected it, but no one was prepared for it. Everyone knew he couldn't live forever. Everyone knew he was gravely ill and has been for many, many months. Everybody knew that he was 95 years old and in frail condition. But at the same time, there was hope that somehow he would continue to survive. Nobody, in South Africa wanted to lose him, wanted him to go.
Not just South Africans, Danny.
Yeah,
all
let's
over
say
the
all
world,
over the world.
And that's what happens when a leader is a good person, when you've done well. And that's why I wanted to talk about, this book that you've written about him. You wrote a lot of things about the different hats that he wore during his lifetime. Let's talk about him being an athlete.
Well, let me just say, the reason I did that was because most people have an image of Mandela in their mind, an image of the smiling face, an image of this tall,
humble,
distinguished man. He's larger than life. He's an icon. And they don't know that he's also a person with lots of contradictions and lots of different interests. In his life, he was a lawyer. He was an activist. He was a lover. He was a prisoner. He had so many.
You put bully in here. We're talking
and he
about
was
that
a bully
as well.
also. When he wanted something done, he would argue tenaciously with people
until he gets
but
it done.
But he believed in what they call collective leadership, not just Mandela leadership. So he was part of a movement, part of an organization. Unlike many big shots, he was accountable to others. He was transparent with others. And I think this is very important to understand the way he worked and why people loved him, because he respected people. He didn't try to lord it over them and be more powerful, more important than they were. He was very humble in many ways. At the same time, he was playing a role, and that role was Nelson Mandela, because people needed a Mandela. They wanted a leader. They wanted somebody who they could believe in. And he became that person, and he played to that, even though privately he had a lot of doubts about it, about whether or not this was appropriate, because he didn't want to take all the attention onto himself. And he told me that when I spoke to him about it many different times, about he was a member of the ANC and that he shouldn't be, given special attention. On the other hand, people gave him special attention.
Okay, so, a lot of people know that he was a boxer. Can you talk about him being an athlete?
Well, I think because he was an athlete, he was able to survive as long as he did. He had the discipline of an athlete. He ran every day. Even when he was in prison, he ran around the cell. And this drove everybody crazy of his comrades, because he tried to push them to also get involved with physical fitness. I spoke to prison guards on Robben Island, where he was 18 years in a really terrible cell, unheated, no hot water, terrible conditions. But he nevertheless maintained a schedule, a regimen of exercise. When he was up every day, he was on like a fighter's schedule. And I think that was one of the reasons he was strong enough to outlast them. They wanted him dead. He wanted to live. And that was really important. And many of the people who were with him said, he drove them crazy, trying to get them to stay healthy and the like. So he was a person that was not just out for himself, and I think that's what many people recognize.
And you know, another thing is, as we're talking about him today, I'm hoping that hopefully the viewers can learn one or two things. You know, you don't have to be everything Mandela was, you cannot be, but at least the importance of exercising. As now, if somebody like Nelson Mandela would take it serious, maybe it's a lesson for us to put that in mind. So hopefully we can learn one or two things about him as we talk about him.
You know, he was in the theater. He played on prison. He played in the play Antigone by Sophocles. He played Abraham Lincoln in a play. So he was used to being a performer. And, you know, as a lawyer, you know, you always have to appeal to the judge and to the various people. So you learn how to, if not manipulate, you know, certainly articulate the feelings that you have. And he was able to speak on a big stage and on a small stage at the same time. You know, this book, Madiba A to Z, The Many Faces of Nelson Mandela, is now being distributed in South Africa and in the United States. And it's an outgrowth of the movie, Mandela Long Walk to Freedom. It was commissioned by the producer of the movie because he knew that the movie can't tell the whole story. No movie can.
Exactly.
So he wanted more historical perspective. And I interviewed over 150 people in South Africa while I was making a documentary about the making of the movie. And I spoke with Thabo Mbeki. I spoke with President de Klerk. I spoke with Archbishop Tutu, many others who gave me personal stories about Madiba, things I had never heard before.
Let's talk about him being a bully, because I never heard about that.
Well, you know, he was part of a process where in the prison, he was like the recognized leader of everybody.
Okay.
Now he comes out, the ANC is a very democratic culture. Everybody debates everything endlessly. And so he was impatient with that. He wanted to get something done. And, you know, in the ANC, they say a leader is the first among equals, not, you know, not more equal. So he wasn't used to that, used to people interrupting him, used to people challenging him. And he did. And there was some conflicts where he fired people who challenged him, then he hired them back. So he was somebody who, you know, was very driven because he knew he had a lot to do in a short amount of time. He, you know, he was only president for one term.
But he got a lot done in that one term. Is it true that he was also a militant?
He was, you know, at a time when the ANC was facing the brutality of the apartheid state, when there were massacres like the one in Sharpeville, the ANC responded with a call to armed struggle, and he became the commander-in-chief of the underground movement in Kanto Sizwe. And he was, you know, somebody who was later arrested, and most people don't realize this, but the CIA tipped off the South African government as to where he was. So the United States doesn't have a lot to be proud of in its role in supporting South Africa.
And speaking of the United States, I just want to talk about him being a terrorist, being listed as a terrorist.
He was listed as a terrorist. Listen to this. He's elected president of South Africa.
Okay.
He's in the headlines every day. He's a famous person. Yet in the United States, he's still on the terrorist list.
Until 2008.
In 2008, and finally, members of Congress, members of the Black Caucus, especially John Kerry among them, you know, changed that. But just 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago here in New York, a leader who was also in Robben Island, Tokyo Saxwale, came to New York and he wasn't allowed in. JFK Airport because they said he was on a terrorist list. So the paranoia going back to the 50s, to the Red Scares and all that is still in place in the mentality and in the laws of the United States. Mandela laughed at all of this, but of course it's still true. And he, you know, basically attempted to bridge the gap. And just yesterday, Newt Gingrich, the right-wing former majority leader, and a Republican presidential candidate, wrote a statement supporting Mandela and criticizing fellow Republicans who were denouncing him as a communist, and which he, by the way, says he never was. So,
but why did they list him as a terrorist?
Because they believed he was part of this conspiracy, you know, and the South African government believed that, and they put him on trial for that. He was acquitted in a treason trial, but he was convicted in a trial for sabotage. And he said, you know, I am prepared to die for my beliefs.
Wow.
And in the end, the court gave all of his comrades and himself life imprisonment. in Robben Island. And when they got there, the head of the prison said, "You are going to leave here in a box." Well, of course he didn't. And he went from prisoner to president, which is very rare.
Okay, so Danny, I'm rounding up, but I just want to know why you listed him as a voice raised up in song.
Because there were people, South Africa is a culture, not just a political system. There are many different tribes, many different cultures there who use music as a form of expression, and he recognized that. And he became very close to some singers, praise singers in South Africa who he supported and who, performed at his inauguration. So we need a cultural appreciation. He was a tribal person, not just a political person. He was tied into this culture. When he would, when they had this music, he would get on stage and start dancing. And people loved it. They responded to it. Yes, of course. He wasn't very formal. He started wearing these kind of special Madiba shirts that were based on the Indonesian shirts that people wear. He was his own person. And he didn't try to conform to the rules, and he spoke up when others didn't. He spoke up for people suffering from AIDS.
Danny, I just want you to say where people can get this book so that they can know more about Madiba.
Well, Madiba A to Z, it's published by 7 Stories Press. It's in bookstores. It's on Amazon.com. It's, being distributed in the United States and in South Africa. Hopefully someday in Nigeria also.
Hopefully. Well, thank you so much for coming on Sahara TV today.
Love it. Okay.
Thank you so much. All right, viewers, that has been Danny Schechter. I'm sure that you've learned so much more about Nelson Mandela today than you knew before he died. Stay tuned. We have more to come to honor Nelson Mandela.